when you think about investing, what seems the hardest for you? What seems the hardest to you? Do you have any thoughts about that? Share them in the chat, if you will. I think I'll let's see if we have any meeting of minds here. Ah, good one. Mm. Ah, yes. Aha. Well, I started out with never having enough money. That's kind of a problem. Marcy says that I'm not getting the whole story, that the broker is just trying to get my business. Nia says, reconciling anti-capitalist politics with planning for my future. Yeah, how do you invest in the system when you're trying to change the system? That's a good one. Katanya says, how much can we invest? Mary says, who can see your messages recording on? Huh, let's see. What else can I see here? That I'm not getting the whole story, that the broker is just trying to get my business. I guess I read that one already. Hello from Wisconsin. I worry about where to invest my money without getting ripped off. Shonda says, being heard and seen for our true worth. Cheryl says, avoiding investing in nuclear weapons companies. Yes. Marcy says that I'm being taken advantage of. Cheryl Spencer says, or fossil fuels. We want to avoid those. Trusting what I'm told. Trusting is so important for all of this, isn't it? Vanessa says that it's not part of public education on a national scale. That's right. Why is it such a mystery for most of the population? Gwen says, how do I make an impact with my dollar knowing I'm an infinitesimal player, just a tiny little player, right? Oh, these are great. How to invest in a way that helps both my local community and social justice concerns worldwide. Delaying as a result of analysis paralysis, right? Oh, these are great. These are great icebreakers. Thanks so much for trusting us enough to put these are pretty personal matters, aren't they? They really are. So I so appreciate that. But we kind of know where we're starting from, and who we all are and what we're concerned about. So thanks for that. I want to just begin with what we usually begin with at an economy of our own, and that is just coming up with some assumptions that we can have in common, along with what you volunteered about, your thoughts about investing. Carmen, do you have that slide on our assumptions as an organization? Yeah, thank you. Our assumption is that money is still talking in a pretty male voice. Our financial systems and rules and tools were not invented by most of us, and generally omit, misname, and discount females. Slavery ended 150 some years ago, but systemic racial and indigenous exploitation remains. It's like the foundation of so much in our country that's economic. Women have always worked, but only the past 50 years or so have the majority of women and young mothers entered the modern job market. People of color, fluid genders, and people with wombs are now business owners and financial managers, yet their caring and yours remains discounted. Economics from the word oikonomia literally means household management. Women's know-how can change an economy that is now waged as war to one that's waging life. That's what we're trying to discover together. And growing inequality, environmental ruin, and war's wreckage of planet and people tells us we cannot afford more alpha male only business as usual. So let's look at some of our premises. The next slide, Carmen. Thank you. Our intentions. Okay. I want you not to feel like you don't know much about investing. I don't know much about investing, but there are these stages of learning that Women's Ways of Knowing, Belinkie et al. Talked about years ago, and I think they still apply. If you feel silent, if you want to be quiet and seen and not heard, and maybe you feel a little dumb and disconnected, don't worry about it. That's just the first stage of learning. And next comes received knowledge. You want to listen to voices of others in authority. We've gathered some wonderful authoritative voices today to talk together, and we can listen in on them, and that's a great way to begin to receive knowledge. Subjective knowledge is when you begin to listen to your own inner voice too, and you feel pretty protective about it and maybe a little fearful and defensive. That's okay. That's just another part of your learning. Then you come to procedural knowledge, where you can respect different ways of knowing, and you become interested not only in what people think, but how their perspectives were formed. And we ask questions, and we find some truths more reliable and logical than others. And then finally, we come to what's called constructed knowledge. We can see all knowledge is built, not born, and we trust ourselves to pursue knowledge by listening to diverse voices, considering a lot of complex contexts, and collaborating while expressing our thoughts and questions. We're going to hold and remodel our ideas with passion and pleasure. Learning at this stage is just a great way to have fun, and that's what we're committed to having tonight. We're going to enjoy ourselves. Okay, thank you, Carmen. We're going to help every woman learn, and you can look at your chat for how to stay in touch with us. Feminists often say that the personal is political. We believe the personal and the political is also economic. Investing is a huge economic subject, so we've narrowed it a little by adding in your personal values as women who want to avoid investing in fossil fuels and nuclear weapons and child labor. Are there ways to invest your money for the greater good? We have an amazing trio of experts to learn from tonight, and you know that because that's why you're here tonight. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce herself briefly by sharing how she came to this subject of investing and why she thinks that it can make a difference in our lives. So Janine, let's start with you. Do you mind? You've worked in Silicon Valley's high-tech world. You've traveled the world. You've written a great guidebook, Activate Your Money, Invest to Grow Your Wealth and Grow a Better World. And you've also co-founded an educational nonprofit, Invest for Better, Women Lead the Way. So where did your interest in investing with money managers still, what have you told me? I think you said they were 70% still men, begin in your own personal journey that brought you here?
Happy to do that. And thank you so much for inviting me, Ricky. It's great to be here with all of you. I was really lucky. I grew up with a mother who talked about money. My mom grew up in the Depression, and money was a big issue for her. And she set out in her life kind of like Scarlett O'Hara in the middle of Gone with the Wind, I'll never be hungry again. She's like, I will never be poor again. And she taught us along the way. So from my mom, when I was in like middle school and college, and high school, I learned about investing in the stock market, and I learned about investing in real estate. So I've been an investor for over 35 years. And
Wow.
I've been learning all along the way. And in addition to my mom, one of the most important ways that I have learned about investing was being in investment clubs and learning aside other women. So I've been in investment clubs 3 times in my life, and they have been phenomenal in every case. So this is not something we have to do alone. As women, we're really used to doing things in groups, and we can learn how to invest with other women to support us on our journey and to learn from them. And I've done that. You mentioned that I was in the high tech industry. That's true. I started my career in 1981 before there were actually even personal computers. I moved to the Silicon Valley because that's where tech was then. I worked at Apple in the 80s when it was still relatively new. I had an amazing career for about 14 or 15 years. And then because I was a big traveler, you mentioned that too, I quit one of my jobs in the mid 90s and I went off on a 5-month journey through sub-Saharan Africa. I came back from that journey just as the internet was taking off, and I decided I want to use my life in a way that's meaningful. And so I got out of high tech just as all my friends were like riding that high tech train. And I shifted to look at the role technology and business thinking could play in solving poverty. And I created a second career doing that for over 20 years. And because of that, I started to really think about the kind of impact that we can have in the world. And I started to realize there was this thing called impact investing that a lot of very rich people and foundations were doing. And I wasn't one of those, but I'd made these huge changes in my career to do work that mattered. And I realized my money was working against me, and I just wasn't going to have that. So over 15 years ago, I started figuring out how I, someone who was not a high net wealth individual, could invest all of my assets in ways that aligned with my life. 6 years ago, I retired from my career and I started working on this problem even more diligently and realized we're at a point where all of us, even if all you have is a bank account, if you don't think of yourself as an investor, if you have a bank account, you're an investor. So all of us can put our money to work in ways that create the kind of world we want to see and solve some of the problems that people were talking about, not being invested in fossil fuels, not being invested in weapons, not being invested in the prison complex. We can do that, and we can do it without giving up financial return. And so now I'm on a mission to help women understand how to do that. And as you mentioned, Ricky, I'm doing that both through the book that I wrote that was written specifically for women, and it teaches us how to be investors. There was a lot of comments in the chat about not being taken advantage of, not knowing where to start. This is about building confidence as investors. And part of the reason we don't have confidence is because there's a lot of lingo that we don't understand. I explain all that stuff in my book. I explain what all of this stuff means. I explain how you can think about this space. So building our confidence is really, really essential. The other thing is, ladies, we are going to control, you asked why this matters. We are going to control the majority of money in this country by 2030. Okay. So just let that sink in for a minute. The problem is that we don't take control of our money. But if we did, and if enough of us started investing our money the way we want in our local communities, not in sin companies, in uplifting women and girls, in creating a sustainable planet, in racial justice, if we started investing that way, we can literally change the economy with our money. So even if you think you're infinitesimal and you're small and you don't matter, not true. You're part of a bigger whole of women who together can change the world. So that is why I do what I do.
Wonderful. Great. So let me invite Vanessa Lowe to tell us your story. You've been a financial educator and activist in Philadelphia for decades now, and you host a radio show there, Vanessa's Money Hour, and touch on all kinds of topics, including public banking and health insurance and all sorts of things. But what makes this topic of investing your values so personal for you? How'd you get here?
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, particularly with these folks. I guess I'll go back to my mother was a social worker, and my father was a correction officer in Sing Sing in their careers. And they were part of the Great Migration. They met at an historically Black college back in the 60s, and they did that very, very, very brave thing that a lot of African Americans did. They left the South and they took a drive all the way up to Big Bad New York City. And they had 3 daughters and raised those daughters. And I think this is going to come up again later. The impact of that move, I hope somebody's sort of looking at that, but we'll get back to that. So that was sort of my grounding. Growing up in New York City, I'm a product of the Bronx public school system. And as a little girl, there were some key memories for me. I remember going into the bank with my mother when she wanted me to have a bank account. I could not see over the counter, but I remember how powerful it was to get this little book. Now, those who are young on here don't remember the little books, but it was like a little passbook account where all the data about all the deposits and everything were kept. So that was a strong memory. Watching my mother pay the bills and do the taxes, again, as a little girl, and I would ask her questions. I remember her explaining tithing to me. And that was a really critical conversation because, I mean, again, could barely see over the table, but she was explaining, this like, yes, the churches used to take care of so many things, but now we have these nonprofits. And so she was explaining why she doesn't give a full 10% to the church. She gives to other nonprofits. So, coming from parents who were very much involved in the church as deacons and sort of thought about things like this and weren't afraid to talk to their kids about money, particularly this very curious little girl who was just fascinated by it. I think that was a start. And then when I went to school, I started out as a business major, yada, yada, that didn't quite work. But I circled back around in later years. I eventually went to business school and got an MBA, and I wanted to do something that was contributing to the world. And so I sort of just tripped on something called Students for Responsible Business. It's now called Net Impact, network for students who wanted to really bring issues of social responsibility into the world, but particularly into their schools. So that was kind of an introduction. And then I got involved in the community development finance field. I actually worked for the CDFI fund, which is a division of US Treasury that supports financial institutions that are dedicated to serving the underserved. So that is one of the key in the old days when we called it socially responsible investing, there's sort of 3 main strategies in community developments. Financial institutions were one of the key strategies and still continues to be today. And then finally, I think the big thing that got me sort of really more deeply engaged was learning about essentially social change philanthropy through a group here in Philadelphia called Red and Roses Community Fund, and then getting involved with my church. When I went to DC to work for US Treasury, I got involved with the Unitarian Universalists, and I went to the national conference because I needed to learn about my new denomination, and I got recruited onto essentially the UU investment fund. And I got to essentially kind of manage the community investing portfolio. So I got a deep dive by going to conferences and learning more about sort of the other components of socially responsible investing. So that was an amazing grounding for me. And I'm actually back on that committee now, 20 years later, and we're doing different things that maybe we'll get into more. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me into this work. What keeps me in it now really is especially now that I'm retired, I spent 21 years in federal service working on access to capital for underserved communities. And in my retirement, I essentially finally got the opportunity to use my own money in ways that I wasn't able before because I didn't have access to it. These are retirement funds. And I discovered Invest for Better, shout out to Invest for Better, and joined a learning circle. And this lady named Janine Firpo was in session number 6, I think it was, or session number 5, talking about direct investments. And that was my first investment that I made with my own funds in something that wasn't just like the stock market. So that's my story.
You don't have to change it either. All right. That's wonderful. I know people are going to want to learn more about how that learning circle operates, but I want to introduce Gwen Pacalo Hart, who you've worked for years in economic development here in New England, and you've been a business owner yourself, and now you are policy director at New England's Center for Women and Enterprise, and you sit on the board of a local community development financial institution, the Vermont Community Loan Fund. And so you have a well-rounded picture of women in enterprise. So I wonder what inspired you to think more about investing and alternative local growth models.
Totally. It's such an honor to be here with Janine and Vanessa and Ricky. So thank you for having me. When I was thinking about this question, I kind of thought about how I got to this conversation like today, right? And I came at it kind of from 3 different perspectives. I entered my academic and then my my practicing career here in Burlington, Vermont. Although I grew up outside of Philadelphia in an old mill town, I came to Vermont at a time when the local first movement was really budding, and I entered an academic and then became a practitioner, an academic program that really looked at community development and local level economic development. And so that became kind of just like a part of my like lifeblood, right? Like that it was just how I perceived the world. Like, yes, all business is done with people that we can see face to face, and it's all creative and additive and community. Blah, blah, blah. So imagine my disillusionment when I entered, you know, my career, and I was a couple years into my career and started building wealth the way that many of us in the professional sphere do. I had a 401k and learning that, what do you mean I don't have say over where that money goes and where did the money go? And I won't see it for years and years. And again, I don't know what's happening to it. At the same time, I was working, I've worked with entrepreneurs since the start of my career. I had a store that featured products from emerging entrepreneurs from around the state. And that's when I really fell in love with the power of entrepreneurship as an inclusive term, in seeing how it changes lives and like makes the communities that we want to live in, that I want to live in, you know, that are awesome. And yet, the longer I've been in my career, I somehow fell into gender economic empowerment. So I started working in women's economic empowerment programming. And what I saw was these women, like literally hundreds of women entrepreneurs per year, who were starting these like life enhancing and life sustaining businesses. And yet they're not the ones that were referenced in the like sexy conversations around, you know, community development. And they so often cannot find capital that makes sense for them morally, financially, socially. And that didn't add up with what my experience was, which is that these women are actually producing communities that I want to live in. And so I started on a mission to see how businesses are actually operating differently and how they can operate differently. Here in Vermont, we're in a kind of luxurious position of being a small rural state that allows us to be progressive and try things out and experimental. And in the deep days of the pandemic and the start of the racial reckoning, I really felt the urgency of needing to find how people are doing business differently. The conversations I was entering were really ethereal and cerebral, and I'm a practitioner. I need to see what's actually possible. And so I stumbled upon C.V. Harquail's work. She wrote the textbook Feminism and founded the Feminist Business Model Canvas and Feminists at Work. And it was through finding CV that it unlocked this like amazing community of feminists whose values really were similar to mine. A couple of other people that got, introduced to me over time were Petra P.K. Mooch, who was the founder of the Feminist Business Enterprise Commons, being exposed to the Post-Growth Institute, Donut Economics, all these different kind of models that really started to make not just me tick, but also see that my money as the little amount that I have can make an impact. And I know we'll get into the rest of this stuff, but two other things that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that really kind of formed a foundation for me, both like spiritually and passionately, was Adrienne Marie Brown's Emerging Strategies book. She wrote it in 2015, and like, I had no idea that an economics textbook could include poems and prayers and like beauty. It just blew my mind. And then I also have this side, I guess, nerddom for moss and mycelium, right? Like mushrooms and stuff. Like just how it interacts and like living ecosystems, and seeing how those principles can be put into place in a feminist economy just makes sense for all. I love that the kind of key word here is flourishing, developing an economy that allows all people to flourish. Like, who can't get on board with that? And it ignites within me a passion that I have a difficult time tampering. So I'm excited to explore the topic further tonight.
Oh, I'm so glad you can't tamper it. Thank you for that. Will you put in the chat when you have a chance, and maybe it won't be until the end, some of those book titles that you shared.
Totally.
Those are exciting. And let me just add for the folks who are attending, we're going to address questions from you later on. We'll have a discussion among ourselves for a while, and then you can pose your questions in the chat, and Carmen is going to help bring those to our attention in a little bit. But feel free to when they come to you, to just put them in the chat. Well, those are wonderful. You can see why we're so excited to have the three of you sit down together and have a conversation about this. I'm going to just be the questioner, but you have so much information to share. Just don't let me go on and on too much. Feel free to interrupt me, okay? I do want to just point out that NerdWallet, which is one of my, I love them. They're my level, NerdWallet. They report that even though 43% of Americans say they save for retirement, 60% of American adults don't have a retirement-specific savings account like a 401k or an IRA. That's about 155.6 million adults. So what kind of impact do you hope to have with your work And what do you find hopeful? And that's just a question for anyone who feels called upon to answer it. Those 155 million Americans who
So
want to save.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to speak to that. So it's really true. And in fact, there's also research that shows a significant portion of Americans wouldn't know where to get $400 in an emergency situation. So the whole issue of saving, budgeting, really managing your money is something that I think has escaped a lot of us. The good news is there are lots and lots and lots of people out in the world that are teaching you how to do those things. So they're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, and forget Twitter. I didn't say that. I don't like those guys. On YouTube, on LinkedIn, on, just all kinds of platforms. And you can go out and find these people who can teach you. And it's a great way to learn. And these are often people, and they will tell you this, and a lot of them are women who will say, I was $300,000 in debt and now I'm a millionaire. And this is how I did it. And they teach you the discipline of how to get smarter about what you spend, where you spend it, how to build in the discipline around saving and investing. They teach you about the importance of compound interest so that when you do invest something, your money multiplies itself over time. It's a thing that you want, even if all you can invest is $50 a month or $100 a month, you should do it, because over time that money will grow. So there's a lot of stuff out there to get you started. That is not necessarily what we do. Because there's so much there doing that, what we do through Invest for Better is we're really talking to women who are a little bit farther along. We're talking to women who already have 3 to 6 or even 12 months of money stashed in a savings account for whatever might come up. We're talking about women who already are making more money than they need. And there's a difference between making more money than you spend and making more money than you need. So you might be making more than enough money. You could be making $250,000 a year, but if you're spending $250,000 or $260,000 a year, then you're in debt, right? So
Right.
we're talking about women who make more than they need and who are ready to start really getting serious about putting their money to work to grow their wealth, and who not only want to grow their wealth, but at the same time want to know that their money is invested in things that are going to create a more sustainable, equitable economy, and that are going to make them feel good about who they are and what their money is doing in the world. So that's what we do, but there's a lot of people to help at the other end of the spectrum as well.
Great, great. I do want to take a minute to just remind folks that there is a curriculum with definitions and with some of the resources that you were mentioning, Janine, for all kinds of levels of wherever you are in your money biography. Yeah. So what do you think is the best first step for learning about investments? You mentioned, some of you have mentioned how important it is not to go it alone. What do you think is a great first step for beginning to invest?
I'm going to kind of answer the first question and this question. Talking to people. One of the reasons I was so excited about having a radio show is because, my friends didn't really want to talk about money much. I mean, I don't know if it was, I think it can be awkward. It can be uncomfortable. And I love talking about it. I love, sort of asking questions about it and hearing about it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get on the radio. And so, twice a month, I find somebody to have an hour-long conversation with. So these days, you have so many podcasts. I mean, Janine's absolutely right. There's so much information. And it can be like sipping from a fire hose, right? So that can be part of the challenge, which again leads to analysis paralysis. I don't know who to listen to. But like the Budgetnista, look her up. She's absolutely fantastic. Just started posting things on Facebook. Now she's helped to pass legislation in New Jersey to have financial education in the school. Hello, wouldn't that be a great idea?
Yes.
So having conversations with your friends, those that are willing to talk about it, finding out each job that you get, even your very first job, even if it's just a summer job, understand those benefits. Understand what are you going to get in the 401k? What are the options in the 401k? What are the rules of the 401k at this particular job? In the interviews for new jobs, that's the thing. Yes, the salary is important, but it's about the healthcare, the 401k, the matching. There's so many other things. And so ask a lot of questions. That's the best thing you can do. And find a favorite blog or speaker and just try to follow a couple of them. That's the thing. We're in our cars a lot still. So for those long trips, listen to a good podcast.
Great suggestion. There are some of them listed on our resources for further learning. Yes. Any other thoughts about starting?
I love the idea that I'm hearing from both Janine and Vanessa, which is like just start, right? Like just like Google something or whatever. And I think that there's this feeling that comes over many of us, which is like there are 700,000 articles and people, and I'm missing out. Like it's that whole like missing out thing that like further drives the fear and further drives the analysis paralysis, that Vanessa was talking about. And one of the things that has been really important for me as an individual is finding people online or whatever articles that actually like use the language I use and that are written by people who seem to kind of get me. And so I also just want to extend that we're out there, like that there's something for everybody.
And I also want to add what we said before is you do not have to do this alone, right? Learning this stuff is not necessarily, it takes time and it's something that you get better at over time. I said that I've been an investor for 35 years. I started out not very smart. I've gotten smarter over time. And I really think of this more like a marathon than a sprint. There is not a quick, easy solution. Everybody has different goals for their money, different time frames for their money, different incomes, different amounts that they can put to this. So this is a very personal thing, but it really does help to talk to other women. And what we have found in our investment clubs is that people actually, women know more oftentimes than they think they do. So we all have imposter syndrome. We all think we have to cross every T and dot every I before we know anything. And that's not true. And there is a really huge value in learning with other people. So if you are at that place where you are like, I got my savings down, I got my budget down, I have more than I need, I'm ready to invest, or I'm already investing and I want to invest with my values, then join Invest for Better. We're really inexpensive. It's like $125 a year to be a member, and you can be put into a group with 8 to 20 other women, and you go through a facilitated training with a facilitator, and you learn this stuff and you talk about this stuff together. So you asked how these groups work. How do investment clubs work, Ricky? You asked that earlier. I mean, it's really about the conversation. So something that makes us really different than someone who's just pushing information at you is we do give you information, but then we let you go into groups and talk to each other about the stories you grew up with around your money, how you feel about your money, what your values are, if you're going to invest your values, where you are right now in terms of your investing, what scares you, what doesn't scare you, what questions do you have? And then we point you toward resources and investments that you may want to consider. So we really try to help you along the way. And we have a lot of experts that we're associated with who help you as well. So learning together, I told you I was investment clubs 3 times. They're brilliant. Let me tell you, they're a great way to learn.
Good.
And I
good.
can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Again, I'm now on my 3rd cycle with the Invest for Better, but I wanna point out, and Janine makes a really good point about the standard 6-month, Invest for Better training that's about impact investing. That is a little more for the advanced. I mean, most of us are probably retirees. We've got access to our money. We've, had a career. But they did a really smart thing, what, about a year or 2 years ago, which is they added other courses that are a little shorter. And the 3-month back to basics of financial planning is absolutely fantastic. That's only 3 months, but it covered the key things that people need to know no matter what age you are. Once you're an adult, it's like you need to know what is a budget, how to do a budget, understand what the 401k is and 403bs are. So that was really a smart idea, and I think really a necessary component to bring in as sort of like a starting point for women who are like, I don't really have any money yet. But so I think that's anybody should really look into joining the next cycle of Invest for Better. It's a really great program.
Great. So mostly when people think about investing, they're thinking about Wall Street, are they not? That's what makes it so scary. And I just wonder, you have mentioned the Treasury Office's Community Development CD Financial
Institutions Fund.
Yeah. And we also have on our resource list the Small Business Administration's program with, what are they called? Therefore, investment, they make investments in growing businesses, larger businesses, a safer
SBICs.
local investment, right? SBIC, thank you. What can you tell us about those 2 realms of investing? I think everybody knows about Wall Street. We hear whether the stocks are going up or down every day on the news. It seems to be what most people think of when they think of investing. But what about this other realm of more local investing? Are there things that women need to know about those institutions?
I would say yes, but I'd love to hear Gwen talk about this too, because she's with us. She's currently with a CDFI. I haven't been, I haven't been with the CDFI fund in quite a while, but cdfifund.gov, literally cdfifund.gov is the federal agency that makes investments in these institutions. There are more than 1,400 CDFIs. They're all over the country and in the the territories. And 30, I'm probably undercounting now, but there were, by the time I left, and that was a while ago, there were 38 of them that were dedicated to serving the Native community. So that industry has been around now for close to 30 years, I believe. So it's well established. They actually got a lot of attention during COVID because with the first phase of the PPP loans, remember, for COVID,
right.
It was a debacle, right? Shake Shack was getting money. It's like, why should Shake Shack be getting money? And so the CDFIs really stepped in the second phase and got the money to the small businesses, the local communities that needed it. So you asked, so I answered the question about how do you find them? If you go to cdfifund.gov, literally, they maintain a list of them. Look for certified CDFIs and you can find the list. There's a sort of a searchable database where you can see those that have been funded already by the CDFI fund. So great resource there. Also, I'm lucky here in Philadelphia, but I think there's other communities that have something like what we call it. Here it's called Impact PHL, and it's essentially a network, a nonprofit organization that uplifts and promotes local community investments. And so I think at least once a month, they're sending out to their listserv, hey, this CDFI is looking for investments, or this new development in the underserved area of West Philadelphia is looking for investors. And so the idea came from, there's great projects going on in Philadelphia. Why are the people having to go outside of Philadelphia to get the money? So it's a network for Philadelphia that is encouraging investments from local folks. And that's what CDFIs are, is it's, they're your local institutions that are really trying to serve the underserved. And, after 30 years, they're doing it very well. The ones that have lasted, like Vermont Community Loan Fund, I mean, if you go to their website, it is so obvious that they are doing things that I was surprised by, because let me just be honest, Vermont is not known as a very diverse state at all. And just going to the website and seeing the pictures of the folks who are being helped and the kind of programs, I'm like, they're doing something. They're doing it right. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Gwen, can you enlighten us a little bit about the Community Loan Fund and the work that you're seeing?
Totally. And I had a little like fangirl moment when Vanessa, in advance of the tonight's session, told me that you were on the board of or on the for the CDFI. Look, I'm all flustered because I'm just so it's so exciting to meet people who have paved the way to allow for organizations like the Vermont Community Loan Fund to continue. It can't happen without the CDFI folks on the national level. So when in answer to your question, Ricky, I think it's important to note that like normal people typically don't really invest in CDFIs unless the CDFI has an investment arm. At the Vermont Community Loan Fund, we do, which is pretty cool. So I'll brag about it for a moment. I am on the board of the Vermont Community Loan Fund, and it's because I deeply believe in the work that they do. They have kind of two sides of the house. One side of the house is you can be an investor, and actually a little like a pet story here is my now husband and I, the first time we appeared legally on paper was when we opened our Vermont Community Loan Fund investment account. It was a 1.5, I think, percent return account when we were saving up to buy our first house. And well, buy our first house, it's our house, with the one house that we bought. And so the Vermont Community Loan Fund it makes investment for people who don't typically fit the profile of someone who is like an investor. Like I became an investor before anybody would be like, hey, nobody would approach me to do anything, you know what I mean? But I could invest directly in my community. And what happens is for those CDFIs, like Vermont Community Loan Fund, that have that investment arm, members of the community, anybody can invest in, and it's like opening essentially like what might be termed a money market account or like a CD. Like you can take your money out. Like it's just it's kind of sitting. It's an interest bearing savings account essentially, right? And then the Vermont Community Loan Fund uses those funds to leverage the philanthropic dollars that come from the CDFI fund, that comes through the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury, and philanthropic dollars. They leverage those dollars, and so they're really putting to work local investments, and it's directly in the community. Now, one thing that I do have a little bit of a beef around is that often the conversation, and I mean, that's why Janine and Vanessa have like significant job security in this realm, is that we often, I don't believe that investing in our communities we need to take a hit on financial returns. And I really abhor that that's the case, right? Like 2.5% returns right now are not competitive in the greater market. And yet it's through that work that we subsidize the communities that we want to see happen. I want to be able to go to the market down the street that, venture capital is not going to be wound up about funding, but I sure want them there so that I can go at 10 o'clock and get the milk for the baby the next morning. You know what I mean? So that's where the work of the CDFIs are so important, because it's filling a gap both on lending out dollars to communities that aren't attractive to a traditional bank, and as well as they make investing available to normal people. I think, to people without the same amount of wealth that one would associate with investing.
So I'd love to
And
jump.
for entrepreneurs who are not, yeah,
Yeah, I'd
go
love
ahead,
to
Janine.
jump.
I was going to ask you what you had to say about this, because you want to grow your wealth. And so what do you think about those lower returns?
So here's what I think. So first of all, I think CDFIs are amazing. And I actually have my money in some of them. And the thing is, you can make loans to them and you will get a concessionary return if you make loans to them. But you can also bank at many of them. So some of my money, and you can also bank at credit unions. So some of my money is in something called the Self-Help Federal Credit Union, and it is in my local community, and it is investing in and giving loans to exactly the kinds of people that Vanessa and Gwen are talking about. And I do not have to give up any kind of return at all because I'm choosing them as a bank. So this is the thing to realize when we're talking about our money. And when you look at what I'm doing personally, and not everybody's going to do this, but I am investing every dollar that I have, starting with my cash, all the way through what I do in private investing, which I didn't even know was a thing that I could do until I was in my 60s. And with my real estate, I'm looking at all of it. Okay. So when you talked about people are concerned about Wall Street, I hear that. But it is also smart not to run away from Wall Street. So I was doing something recently and some research recently, and I learned that some of the highest net worth individuals, there's a piece of research that was done talking to 500 financial advisors, et cetera, representing $2.5 trillion worth of wealth, and looking at how did those people invest their money. 26% of their money is in the stock market. The richest people in the country, 26% is in the stock market. Another 17% is in bonds, fixed income. So almost half of their money is in quote unquote Wall Street, right? So big percentage, 34%, is in real estate. So they also do a lot in real estate, both through multiple homes, expensive homes, but also in commercial real estate. So don't run away from Wall Street. The secret to success and the secret to growing wealth is to be diversified. And what one person, actually many, when I wrote my book, I had about 40 finance professionals help write portions of it. And one woman reminded me often that the way you allocate your money is actually a more important decision to your financial health than what you specifically invest in. So as Elvest has taught us, as women, we put 70% of our money in cash, sitting in savings accounts. That money is making you nothing. Right now, maybe if you're at a good bank, you're making 4 or 5% because the interest rates are high. But until very recently, that money not only was making you nothing, it wasn't even coming up to inflation. So it was losing you money. But that's what we invest in. So you need to think about how much of my money is in cash, which is going to get me 0 return. How much of my money is in fixed income, which is going to get me, like right now, maybe 5%. How much of my money is in the stock market, which over the long term returns about a 7% per annum return, although those figures change over time. But over the long term, and as women, that's what we're investing in. We are long-term investors. We outperform men by 40 basis points to 1% because we don't buy and sell and buy and sell. We buy and hold. We're long-term investors. So how much are you going to have in the stock market? How much, what do you want your return to be at the end of the day? And then how do you allocate your money along these different things? How do you think about other kinds of investments like real estate or farmland or timber? Do you want those in your portfolio? They will diversify you, protect you. Do you want to do private investing? It's a great way to uplift other women, and even women who have limited resources can do some of that through crowdfunding. So when you think about investing, get out of just the stock market bubble. There are many other options, but don't leave the stock market behind. That's
Great.
my
I love it. Well, yes. Well, let me see. What other questions that I want to run by you? Are there specific items that you wanted to talk about? Gwen, I think you wanted to really touch on women entrepreneurs who are passionate. And I remember, Vanessa, you talked about a particular fund that you were really interested in that was women funding women entrepreneurs.
Well, so Portfolia is the fund that I invested in, and I learned about it from Janine. It is a venture capital fund started by a woman who actually worked for the Kauffman Foundation, and which has been supporting entrepreneurship for years and years. And I invested in the Rising America Fund, which at the time they were created, it was the only fund led by a team of that was all women of color. Now we have more, including the Fearless Fund. We won't go on that tangent, but you know about the lawsuit by a white male saying that it is discriminatory for them, these Black women, to only give grants to other Black women. So that's a whole long
Oh, I
conversation.
didn't know about that. The
Oh, yeah,
Fearless Fund has been now?
Look up Fearless Fund and you can
Oh,
find articles about it. But
oh my.
part of my work with both the local foundation I'm involved in and my denominations fund is now really looking at, okay, what are the particularly Black female-led funds that exist? And there are a lot of them now that we could support.
Uh-huh. Gwen, did you want to talk about your passion about that?
Totally. You know, and
You
I
have
think
been a woman entrepreneur, yes? You are
I
one.
have, and then you know, we at the Center for Women in Enterprise work with a couple thousand women entrepreneurs across New England each year. We do training and then one-on-one business counseling, and seeing that community is amazing. And you know, one of the questions that Ricky had kind of said maybe we'll be talking about is what's the full picture of returns that we're looking for. And we at the Center for Women in Enterprise observe a lot of women in what we call the multiplier effect. Like, women incubate their employees' businesses. We see spin-off companies. We see, like, it's amazing to see the investments that women entrepreneurs make into our communities. And when I think about some of the areas that we'll need to figure out in the coming years, is we've got this generation of successful, sustaining entrepreneurs who are looking to leave their business. And in the past, buying a business was a great investment strategy for individuals. And I was just talking to a woman who bought a sustaining business when it was 10 years old. She grew it for another 20 years and is looking to sell that business. And she's having a difficult time finding a buyer. What in her words were, I don't think that there's a class of people who can buy this business anymore. And I thought that was really interesting to hear that from an individual, and know that her story is not the only one that we hear like this. And so when I think about opportunities for investment, Janine, had mentioned some opportunities in crowdfunding that allow people with fewer resources to be able to access opportunities to invest in the types of businesses that we want to see in our community. I also think it's important to note that invest there. It actually started in Philadelphia. There was a model by the owner of the White Dog Cafe. I'm sure Janine and Vanessa know who I'm talking about, and I'm sorry I don't remember her name. Judy. I always want to say it's Judy White, but it was White Dog Cafe. Anyway, she started these the Circle of Aunts and Uncles, which were these small investment clubs that also provided that community to individuals who don't have generational wealth. And whenever we talk about investment, entrepreneurship, I think it's imperative that we note that there's this classification that is that there are self-made people. There's so much generational wealth that holds up these businesses, right? That we think of as the self-made person. They had the connection to the person who had the connection to the right? And so that's where I think connecting into the your local entrepreneurial ecosystem, if investing in small businesses is of interest to you, connecting in with some of the players that are interacting with the small businesses is a really powerful way to get connected into this passionate world that doesn't show up on the doesn't show up on the typical radar of investments. I can go further, but I want to make sure I don't take up too much time. There's a really cool fund though, Potlicker Capital out of Louisiana, I think.
What is it called again?
Potlicker Capital, and I can put it in the chat. And they're one of many organizations that are now really focused on, hey, you don't have generational wealth, you can still start a very successful business. And part of that generational wealth, it's not just money, it's also access to knowledge and access to people who have stories like ours. So there's some great work on. I'll put it in the chat if that's of interest.
It is. Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
So thank you for the discussion around this sort of idea that, all these, rich guys, right? Rich, tall white men. That's a whole different conversation. Sort of they have the same profile. That, they bootstrapped and, they failed their way forward. But one of the books that I like to talk about is, if you have not read it, everybody should read Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva. Edgar Villanueva is a Native American guy who worked in the foundation industry for, I think, more than 20 years. And I think it's, with COVID, you lose count, but I think it was about 5 years ago, he published this book. It is now a movement. And essentially the book, he actually says it's a love story to the foundation industry, foundations and endowments, to acknowledge and recognize that the source of that wealth that they're holding is stolen land and stolen labor, particularly from Native Americans and African Americans. And so it's really encouraging foundations and endowments to be the leaders in the reparations movement, acknowledging, apologizing, and then changing how they're doing their investments. Not looking at just a little 5% that you're giving away that's probably contrary to how you're doing with the other 95% that's just sitting there, but really looking at the whole portfolio and decolonizing that wealth and trying to create a new society almost. I've put the link in the chat for the website for that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Janine.
Sure. I would love to just go off of that and speak to the comment that Tara has put into the chat about how can you generate wealth and create economy of your own when these businesses are just going to continuously increase profits and marginalize costs and do all of these things that we know? I think it's really important. So this is my soapbox, and you can believe what I'm going to say or not. But I really think the reason that we have the kind of winner takes all, it's all about the stakeholder, the shareholder. It's all about maximizing return. Nothing else matters when you're investing, comes from Milton Friedman 70 years ago.
Yes.
He said that the best thing that you can do for society is to let companies maximize the return for their shareholders. I think he was dead wrong. It was a very white male attitude. I think it's completely wrong. I think we are in a situation today where we can see the ramifications of that. It's just about maximizing return. Nothing else matters. You can pollute the hell out of the planet if you want. Companies don't have to pay the externalities of cost to clean that up. The rest of us do. The rest of us are going to suffer from climate change. The rest of us are going to suffer from minimizing workers. The whole point of the kind of investing we're talking about is to change that story. So when you invest your money in a bank, when you pull your money out of the big banks and you say, you know what, I'm not going to let you use my money anymore to do investment that way. I'm putting my money in a local bank that is impacting and uplifting the people in my community. When you say, you know what, I'm not going to invest in the bond market the way you say I should anymore. I'm going to invest in muni bonds that are improving society in my community or communities around the country, or I'm going to put my money into green bonds, or I'm going to put my money into these other things that actually exist for the purpose of changing the game. You can pull your money in the stock market, so it's not invested in the companies that are doing these things. If you really want to have impact in the stock market and you're willing to take a little bit of a concessionary hit, not a big one, but like less than a 1 point a year, percentage a year, you can invest through companies that do shareholder advocacy and that go to these companies that are behaving this way and saying, we're not going to invest in you anymore unless you change your behavior. And they force companies to change behavior. There are 100% absolutely things we can do with our money. Somebody asked, what's private investing? Private investing is when you're investing in something that is not the stock market, cash, or fixed income. Companies that are not on the stock exchange. They can be anything from what we hear about venture capital, Silicon Valley, to the kind of small businesses that Gwen and Vanessa were talking about. Of all the venture capital money that was invested in 2022, about 2.5% went to female CEOs. That's it. Black female CEOs, a fraction of 1%. So right now, the whole private investing game is all about white men investing in white men. If we want to see that change, particularly women who have more capital, we need to start investing our money in female CEOs and in female entrepreneurs. And there are many, many ways to do that. You could do it through debt, you can do it through equity, you can do it directly into a particular company, you can do it through funds. There's all kinds of ways to do it. So I said that was my soapbox. I'm off of it now, but this stuff just fries me, the way we have been taught to invest our money and what it's done to society is just, it's beyond the pale in my opinion.
It's true. Milton Friedman has a lot to do with that. I agree. All right. Do we have time for some questions from the audience here? Oh, we're going over a little bit. Carmen, I'm not seeing the chat. Can you field a couple of questions for us? I think we have time for a couple anyway.
I think that Gwen may have just spoken to, that was the only question I had seen so far in the chat.
Oh, yes, we talked about private investing and what that is.
And generating wealth inside of sort of a broken economy. Oh, Katanya is raising her hand.
I'm trying. Here we are. Hi, I'm loving the conversation about the 401ks and on the jobs and the like and what that looks like. I just got my statement last week about I've been on my job for 17 years. When I came from my other job, I rolled it over into this state entity. And that was about $5,000 from 12 years of working as a pharmacy tech. And 17 years later, this statement is saying I only have $6,000 for retirement. I am not understanding how that works. How is it that I can give you from 12 years 5,000 and then pretty much I'm only looking at 1,000 for 17 years of service? I mean, am I missing something? Does it get divided up? Do I need to what? I mean, like, what kind of what does that sound reasonable?
So here's where we should do the disclaimer that says that we are not financial advisors. We're not your financial advisors. We cannot give any recommendations. And the first thing I would say is you need to sit down with your employer and whoever the HR person is and get an understanding of what you are invested in. Because maybe it's just been in, a money market fund. I think Janine mentioned if you want to beat the market, you've got to be in the stock market. So, but also looking at the history, and I'm glad you're opening your statement. Some people don't even open their statements. So yeah, you want to monitor your statements and see what's happening. But the first thing you should do is make an appointment with the benefits department and sit down and really understand what's going on, because something sounds wrong there.
Totally agree. I just did some quick calculations. It looks like you were getting about 1% return per year. So I think your money's been sitting in cash.
Oh, I wonder. Yeah.
So, what Vanessa just said about knowing what you own. Oh my God. I talked to a woman who had worked for 30 years. She had 4 retirement accounts. I asked her, well, what are you invested in? She's like, I don't know. I think I'm in the same thing in every account. I'm like, well, what is it? She didn't know. She shared that with me. She was invested in exactly the same fund in all 4 of her accounts. And that fund had underperformed the market by over 12 percentage points for 30 years. That woman left literally millions and millions of dollars on the table, and the difference between her being able to retire the way she wants and not, because she never paid attention. She never paid attention. And paying attention, and if you're young in particular, please learn this stuff, teach your kids. Let's be the last generation of women that don't know what we're doing around money.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
There's some more hands there.
Are
Mary
there?
G and Tara.
I do see other hands. I also have a question in the chat from Diana about how to guide an advisor. She says she has a great financial advisor, but the advisor is resistant to moving away from her company's advice and towards more socially and environmentally conscientious equities.
So a quick answer is there's a group called Values Advisor. It's actually a nonprofit right now, and they have 42. It is a curated list of financial advisors who are committed to and have a history of helping people to align their money with their values. So valuesadvisor.com, I think it is, but Values Advisor is just .org. Okay. There you go.
There is a fee for using it, but if you're a member of Invest for Better, you can use it for free. And we actually have a course to teach you how to find a values-aligned financial advisor. If your financial advisor is not doing what you want, and we're not talking about money that's sitting in a retirement account because you have a lot, like a 401k or an IRA or something like that. If it's not money that's sitting in a retirement account, employee led, then fire them. If they won't help you, fire them and find someone who will. You're paying them probably as much as 1% a year of however much money they're managing on your behalf. If you do the math on that, you're probably going to be unhappy when you see how much you're paying them. So find someone who you're going to pay and who's going to do what you want. They're out there.
Thank you.
Good.
Tara, do you want to go ahead and, oh, where did Tara go?
Yeah, sorry, I put my hand down because I was thinking about whether or not to share this, but I just feel like you know, again, the focus on generating wealth is really difficult for me as a young lefty who wants to watch this system burn and doesn't want to invest any more money into this and doesn't really want to have to live in a world where the women who figure out how to sign up for that $125 membership for, you know, this and that and do the work on the like, it's still creating such a difference in people who even like have the time. Like, think of how many people even have the time to join a Zoom like this. Think of how many people even have the mental bandwidth to join a Zoom like this, to even start the conversation. Like, I just wish, I was really hoping that I would come on this call and there would really be a way of building an alternative economy so that we don't have to spend so much time figuring out how to like stand on someone else's shoulders. And yeah, I just really felt like that needed to be said.
Thank you, Tara. I think a lot of us feel that way, and when we're talking about creating an economy of our own, this is just one piece of the existing economy. That doesn't mean that there aren't other pieces that we also need to do. I mean, the whole notion of what our dollars are exactly, and who owns them, and who issues them, and how the Federal Reserve works, for instance, are other subjects that we need to think about and talk about. So this is just one piece of the economy that women have been intimidated by and need to build their confidence about, so that because money does make a difference in whether you're struggling or you're flourishing. Yeah, but it's certainly not the only way to address the economy.
So Tara, I just put 2 links in the chat. One is called Rich and Resilient Living. It's a woman named Laura Oldani. She was a contributor to my book. She doesn't believe in the stock market. She is not an accredited investor. And an accredited investor means that you either as an individual make $350,000 a year, or as a couple, I think it's $300,000, or you have $1 million in assets, excluding your home. So most Americans are non-accredited investors. She is one of those. She does not invest in the stock market. She has a website that talks a lot about alternative ways to invest. She does a lot in the permaculture space. I think she's a great place for you to go. She's also written a book about what really matters and values. The other site is The Next Egg. So The Next Egg is an organization that is committed to local investing. They help people set up something called SDIRAs, which is a self-directed IRA. It's a different kind of an employment account that allows you to invest in anything the heck you want, as long as it's not self-serving. So you can't, for example, invest in a home and then rent it out part of the time and live in it part of the time, or let your family live in it. That would be considered self-serving. But if you do things that are not self-serving, this is another way to invest in a really, really different way. So those are 2 resources to get you started in the direction you would like to go.
Thank you.
And I see Mary has a hand up as well. Mary, do you want to unmute and share your question?
Hello.
We can hear you, Mary. Is that you? Oh, I guess it wasn't Mary.
Well, I'm afraid that we are running out of time. One last call. All right. I think we're going to say we're going to wind this up and just thank our wonderful panel for a great discussion. I learned so much, and I really appreciate all the links that you put in the chat. All of the chat links will be going to all of the attendants, so that'll come along with a recording of this event if you'd like to share it with others. We'd love for you to do that. We're trying to get the word out about women learning about the economy in all kinds of ways. So, Carmen, can you share a slide with us about, yeah, thank you so much, Janine, Vanessa, and Gwen. There you are. Women investing for change. Yeah, for people and the planet. We heard that all talked about tonight. We probably could have an entire show about an event about just environmentally sustainable investment, which we didn't really talk that much about tonight. But sustainable investing is a really important subject also. But it was a great conversation, and I'm so grateful. Those of you who enjoyed it, we'd love to see your reaction. Slide 4. We want to thank our wonderful audience for joining us, for signing up for this. We lift up every woman's expertise in economics, whether you've got money or not. We know that you do miraculous things with what you do have, and we really appreciate your joining us tonight, and hope you will join us again for other conversations about other elements of the economy. As I said, there's so many pieces that we need to address. I want to remind you of the investment curriculum link that you have available to you. Share that too if you'd like. Our ongoing question here at An Economy of Our Own is, how do we transform an economy that is essentially wages war in constant competition, looking for winners or making money kings, into an economy waging life? We think women know a great deal about that, and so we're interested in learning from you what you think is important for us to learn in the coming year. We're making some plans now for what we're going to be doing, so we'd appreciate your input. The ongoing question is, how do we keep going as an organization? Can you do the next slide, Carmen? Yeah, in women we trust, and the men who love us too. There's lots of ways to stay in touch with us. We have a web page where all of our Zooms of our own are with their curriculum are posted. We have social media at Economy of Our Own on all the usual Instagram, Facebook. We are on Twitter, although we're reconsidering that. We have a newsletter that we'd love for you to subscribe to, and a blog at Medium. You can invest in women and our growing knowledge of the economic world through our giving circle. That's really important for us to continue to put these conversations together. And there's a survey on our website where you can let us know what you're thinking about, what you think is important, and send us your suggestions and ideas. Together, we can build an economy of our own, and it should be one. I think we're all in agreement that it should be one where we're all flourishing, where we don't have these gigantic divides between the haves and the have-nots. So I think one of the subjects we need to talk about in the coming year might be taxes. We haven't talked about that at all. This is my idea off the top of my head here. So we think you're brave to care enough to come to this tonight. And thank you again. And I hope you'll stay connected with us. And if you're low on money and can't give to our giving circle, there are still ways that you can help us by sharing our social media posts, our newsletter, and just talking with your friends about our organization and the organizations that come to visit us on our Zooms and represent all kinds of ways to think about the economy and all of its complexity. So with that, good night. A big thank you to everyone. And Carmen Rios behind the scenes. Thank you, Carmen. Mary Beth Gardam, who is our timekeeper. Katanya Hart, who figured out how I could make this work, even though my internet was down here in Montpelier, Vermont. She reminded me of there are hotspots that you can sign up for with your telephone. Did I just say that? My iPhone. I know the difference. And I want to thank Mary Beth Gardam and Georgia Kelly and Rianne Eisler and Dee Dee Pershaus and Crystal Arnold, all members of our alliance and their organizations that made all of this possible. That's it for tonight, folks. Thanks again, Janine, Gwen, Vanessa. Great show. Thanks so much. Great conversation. Great learning. Good night.
Thank you so much, Ricky.
Thanks so
Sure.
much.
And
It was
Gwen.
such a pleasure.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Great to be on the call.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ricky. Bye-bye.
Bye.